Hey everyone, it's Spicysushi. If you're unfamiliar with my channel, I like to do a video covering my considerations for my league starter as well as my strategy at the start of a league to generate a lot of currency early on. Since it looks like there's going to be a lot of min-max potential when it comes to Crucible passive trees crafting, I'm super excited for the league, and so definitely consider subscribing if you want to see, Crucible crafting content or anything like relating to min-maxing of builds, etc. And I really appreciate it. For 3.21, I'm really excited to try out Pathfinder. The Ascendancy was completely busted last league, especially with the introduction of Progenesis and the Impending Doom build. So it's one of the things I'm looking forward to rush as fast as possible, since I want to do a lot of Wandering Path Apothecary farming in Crimson Temple, because it is my favorite content in the game, and it is very difficult, so it is good to have like a very tanky build that also has good clear, like Impending Doom Pathfinder. Just to give you an idea what I'm talking about, this build that Rutu made has 1k armor and 1.2k evasion. It is literally not running Grace or Determination, the two most mana-intense auras for defensive layers in PoE, but the build still has 150k max hit and 125k EHP without these. And the reason this is possible is it's because Pathfinder is able to stack a lot of Flask Effect and Flask Duration, and it's on the right side of the tree where a lot of the good Flask nodes are, so with flasks like Taste of Hate and Progenesis, you're able to get tankier than most builds in the game, without even sacrificing your mana on defensive auras, which is especially powerful since the masteries have been rebalanced to where the reservation efficiencies are not available unless you take a mana wheel. Now obviously this build is going to be very expensive, it uses a lot of costly items and unique, so I am going to have to choose a solid league starter to farm a lot of currency up before I switch to this. So I figured I would go ahead and go over to all the things I've been considering the past few days. It's been a really tough choice since a lot of these builds look super fun, but I do have to be a little bit picky for the type of content that I want to do at the start of the league, but I'm still going to go over builds and recommendations that I would have for any content that you decide to do. Pohx's Righteous Fire, obviously it has to be mentioned, an amazingly written guide, very strong defensive layers, and it actually got buffed this league with more access to life regeneration and max res, so I think it's going to be really good for dominating the league mechanic. Now, I do like something that is a little bit intensive, and I think Righteous Fire is way too chill for me, but if you are looking for that, it is absolutely a build that you should be considering. Now, if you still want to play a bosser that isn't ZHP, I do want to mention Ice Trap, because it has been an extremely solid bossing build for multiple leagues now. It has like nearly the same power as before when you compare to like how much Seismic Trap lost, so I think if you're looking forward to farming uber bosses, and so I just wanted to throw that out there as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the builds that I've been spending the past week thinking about mainly. Now, the Ignite Witch archetype is something I've played for multiple leagues at this point. It has such extremely easy leveling, and then it has a great transition into whatever build you want to play. Specifically, the four builds that I think of, definitely Ignite Vortex by Rutu, EA Ballista by Palsteron, Fire Trap Frostblink by Subtractum, and then EK Ignite for like the juicers, I think made by MBX. So most of these builds actually start with Armor Brand Cremation, which did not get nerfed compared to like Poison Concoction and Spectral Helix. So the leveling is still going to be really strong even without the onslaught support, and then you're going to have a very easy transition into what most of these builds do, which is Wave of Conviction, until you have enough money to transition into whatever you want or get some necessary pieces of the build. So what all four of these builds need before you really get it going is you want a source of fire exposure, usually from an Eldritch Implicit on your gloves, so you can finally drop Wave of Conviction. EA Ballista does this very early on because you can just take Elemental Equilibrium and do like lightning damage with your bow and you are good to go. But on the others, you probably do need to wait for that Eldritch Implicit before you swap, but it doesn't really matter because Wave of Conviction is so insanely strong that you're not going to feel like you're playing a lesser build until then. So yeah, I think just alone on how great the smooth the transition is and the fact that all four of these builds are very strong for in-game content, I have to recommend them. If you're not a fan of the totem playstyle, you definitely won't enjoy EA because it actually has a little bit of delay even after placing a totem. EA Ballista is my favorite of the four simply because it is amazing for farming Expedition, which is a league mechanic that I love to do at the start of a league. I'll get into that later on. Now, Ignite Vortex is something I would recommend if you're looking for like a well-rounded beast. It is going to be a build that you can put money into throughout the entire league if you're a one-build person, and it's going to just feel better and better, especially when you get the Forbidden Flame and Flesh combo later on. Fire Trap Frostblink is something that I definitely haven't seen before on an Ignite Witch build, so I think if you want to think about that, definitely check out Subtractum. I think it's the build that I would play if I did go with the Ignite Witch archetype, simply because it's just new and something I haven't really seen before. But if I was wanting to maybe juice maps and have like an AoE screen-wide clear, I think Ethereal Knives Ignite is extremely strong for that. So if you are someone that can pump a lot of currency and get a Headhunter early on, I think EK will just completely crush the other three when it comes to mapping, but you will not be as tanky. Content that I think these builds specialize in are definitely Blight, Delirium, and Harvest due to like the extreme power of spreading big ignites. So if you're doing any of that content, definitely consider these. Now, I probably won't be considering Poison or Chaos Witch starters simply because I'm not super confident in Poison Concoction now. I have no idea how it would feel, but if you know what you're doing, I'm sure you will have a great time. And Crouching Tuna actually released an Impending Doom Occultist starter guide recently, so definitely check that out if you still want to play that archetype. Cold Dot Witch is something that I definitely considered, but I think the number of buttons are kind of steering me away from it now because there's a lot of Cold Dot abilities that you really have to cast, and then also there's like self-casting curses. If you don't mind that stuff at all, it does look insanely strong. I've actually seen Cold Dot Witch be able to do Uber bosses honestly at the same or faster than most other Witch archetypes, so I definitely think it's very, very strong. So anyway, that's it for Witch. The other class I'm interested, or the other two classes I'm actually interested in is Ranger and Duelist, specifically Champion and Pathfinder. And the reason for this is I actually need a build that can be very strong on a shoestring budget and still have great defense like day one of the league. But since I want to jump into Expedition logbooks on the very first day of the league, I do have to pick something that meets those requirements instead. So the way League Starts pretty much used to go for me was that I would rush Endless Heist in the campaign by like, before I even finished the axe, I was already farming hundreds and hundreds of chaos. You could simply use the Book of Regression. It's like a D-level book. You could use that to reset the heist contract vendor an infinite amount of times and get as much money as you wanted before moving into your actual strategy for the league. And for example, 2 leagues ago, I actually made like over 70 divines by day 3 of the league, literally just from blueprint farming. I was infinitely farming reveal contracts to get enough to do blueprints that I would buy off trade for like 8 chaos. And I would use this to fund anything I wanted. So I was able to make that league an in-game mapper before the first week of the league was even over. Now, obviously, after the 3.21 patch notes, Heist is completely off the table. You will still be able to buy contracts as you level up to before Katava, but they even reworked the vendor system actually to where you might not actually get many contracts back in the pool when you level up and reset the vendor. So that kind of poses an issue since I want to jump into logbooks as fast as possible now, and you want to do high item level logbooks. Because if you didn't know, the item level of a logbook directly affects the number of remnants that you're going to get, which decides how much loot you're going to be dropping. And item level 80 plus is what you want to be at to actually get an expedition boss. And you might be saying item level 80 plus logbooks, there's no way those are going to be available early on in the league, but they actually are because there's so many people that push maps so fast nowadays that I remember ROG and 2-gen expedition logbooks, item level like 78 to 80 plus were popping up literally within the first like 12 hours of a league, and I would love to be able to jump into that content instantly. Now, to do that, there are a few things that I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to play a build that can actually do this content on the first day of a league. Now, for an actual Expedition Week 1 farming guide, I'm going to be releasing a separate video because that's just way too much content to cover in this. So I do kind of just want to go over the build. So I've already gone over the requirement. It needs to have great defense from basically just the passive tree. What I mean by that is that Duelist and Ranger actually have great access to the right side of the passive tree, so you can get effectively 90% or a higher spell suppression cap without even having any spell suppression on your gear itself. While Pathfinder can stack a lot of flasks and have them always operating, so you're going to be at like very, very high defense. Champion has, Fortify, which is like the single best hit reduction defensive layer in the game. So honestly, it's really just damage that I need to solve for, and when it comes to damage, I think Corrupting Fever on Champion and Toxic Rain on Pathfinder are the two builds that can be doing really solid DPS with very little money. I think for Toxic Rain, Palstron was actually able to do the Feared with just basically a Quill Rain, and so this is usually an extremely common bow. I think a lot of people are playing this build, which is my only worry. I feel like it's really hard for Quill Rain to actually be an expensive item, but it's always possible. Wilma is extremely common as well, the helmet that goes with this build. And I'm hoping that is cheap as well since it's so common, but But they are definitely things that I'm going to be prepared for. I'm going to be mapping for quite a few hours before the logbooks actually pop up on trade, and I'm assuming by then I can have enough money to put a basic build up like that together. I'm not a huge fan of the Toxic Rain playstyle, but the build is obviously going to be extremely strong, and I do recommend checking out Palsteron's build if you're interested in that. The clear is not the most satisfying thing to me, but so I'll be looking to switch off of it pretty soon, and maybe leaning towards like Lightning Arrow if I get more money, or VG. Now, Corrupting Fever, on the other hand, has actually flown under the radar quite a bit. It's an extremely strong League starter that actually got buffed with the patch notes. I recommend checking out Rutu's build sheet, and I think there actually is a Maxwell guide that'll be coming out as well. That'll go into detail on that. I just haven't ever leveled a Duelist before, actually never, so it would be completely new to me, but I'm definitely open to this possibility. So anyway, that's going to be it, guys. Sorry for the super long video. That's just basically all that's been going through my mind the past few days. I will have like some crafting guides as well as some like ROG and Expedition logbook guides coming up before the league starts, since I know I'm going to get a lot of questions on those. But yeah, thank you guys if you hung out this long, and I will see you next time.